In our last episode of Data Dorks, we learned how to find characters or strings inside larger strings or blocks of text. One thing we came across that was a little different in Python was what I called the find method. Although it works similarly to a function, I was very adamant about making the distinction that it was actually called a method. On this episode of Data Dorks, you will see why it is slightly different. And although we have already seen a few different data types up to this point, we will talk about why understanding the type of data we store in our seller variable is important. So up to this point, we have seen a couple different data types in both Excel and Python. We have worked with whole numbers, commonly referred to as integers. We have worked with decimal numbers, commonly known as floating point numbers. We have worked with true and false values we called booleans. And we just worked with words that we called strings. As you probably noticed, or maybe even assumed, each of these types of data have certain restrictions as to the operations they can do and the outputs they can have. For example, booleans can only be true or false. In strings, we aren't really able to divide by 12. This is what makes understanding the different data types so important to a data dork. Let's take a look at an example. So I'm a pretty big Rick and Morty fan, and one of my favorite phrases that Rick says is wubba lubba dub dub.
Wubba lubba dub dubs! Yeah!
Let's try and recreate that phrase in an Excel formula using just the 3 base words. Now, if you have never done this or are new to Excel, you might think the plus operator could help us out here. So let's try it. We get a value error though, which tells us something went wrong. In Excel, the plus operator only works with numbers, so there is a completely different operator if you would like to join 2 words together, or what is called in Excel concatenation. To join strings together, instead of the plus sign, we use an ampersand sign. Now, what about the next part? We want dub to repeat twice so we can get dub dub, and there is no reason why we should have to select the same cell multiple times. Here it might work, but what if we wanted to repeat something 20 or 50 times? For this case, maybe the multiplication operator will repeat words though. Let's try. That doesn't seem to work either. For this, we actually need one of those special Microsoft built-in functions. The specific one we need to find is the rep function, which I would assume stands for repeat. Now we can put these together and have our phrase. Let's use the built-in function that also exists to perform the same process as the ampersand operator, called the concat function. Now we have wubba lubba dub dub. You can see why the type of data goes hand in hand with the specific operations you are trying to perform on that data. Like in the case of our find method, it's really called a method because it naturally lives on all string or string variables. So it is still a function in the way that it is pre-written code that does something for you, but is specific to that data type. Because in the same way there is no reason to divide a string by 12, there is no reason to find a character, say inside a large number. Now I must admit I've misguided you a little to make sure you understood the importance of data types. Python is a little more flexible than Excel as it relates specifically to math operators. However, as you continue down the path of a data dork, you will uncover the majority of situations this is not the case. Let's try and get Python to say wubba lubba dub dub. Let's try to join rickword1 with rickword2 using the plus operator. Oh wow, that totally worked. Also note that if you are trying to recreate this in Excel or Python, I actually added a space at the end of each word. Otherwise, the words are right next to each other. This is harder to see in Excel, but more obvious here. So I could instead remove the space and do this instead. All I'm doing is joining an empty space string in between our 2 ric variables to create a space. Now let's also try to get dub dub twice with the multiplication sign. That worked also. Pretty sweet, right? So we could just do this in Python. And again we have wubba lubba dub dub. We just learned why thinking about the specific data types we are working with is important as a data dork. In our next episode of Data Dorks, we are going to use this knowledge and look at our first complex data type called a list, which if you love Excel, you will feel right at home working with lists.